right, since we're the last panel before the lunch break, I thought I'd mix things up just a little bit in format. And after we introduce ourselves here, I'm going to just do a really brief presentation to kind of set the stage and keep us all onto the same theme, because I think we could easily talk for an hour and a half with this panel, and we'll try to keep it in the half hour and get us off to lunch. So, as mentioned, I'm Adrian Pearmine with STV, lead up our western part of our practice around emerging mobility and transportation. And I would like the panel to just go down and introduce yourself. Let's keep this part really brief to name, title, role within the organization, and then after I go through my presentation, we'll go right back down the panel again and talk about your personal and department, division, organization's perspective on the sort of the last question that I'll leave us with. You want to start?
Afternoon, I'm Rishi Raj. I work with City and County of Denver as a senior cost analyst, and the department I work with is Program Management Division.
Matt Leckie from NextAir Energy, and I work on residential VPPs using batteries.
I'm James Warren. I work for the City of Denver for the Climate Office. You heard from Liz earlier, so I'm in the office with her.
And I'm Marisa Walker. I'm with the Arizona Commerce Authority. We're the state's economic development agency, and I'm a senior vice president for infrastructure, and I'm the executive director of the Institute of Automated Mobility.
Great, thank you. So this is my panel's first time seeing this presentation. We're at an infrastructure conference, but our focus, and I think most of us can kind of relate to this, that data is the new infrastructure is a buzz phrase that's being thrown around quite a bit. I don't think that's exactly accurate. Data around infrastructure is an extremely valuable new resource that we need to be planning for as we think about our connected communities and connected cities. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call the third revolution, or the future of mobility. And there's various folks who've been using third revolution or three revolution and various different definitions for it. But I think it sets the stage a little bit for how, well, I won't get ahead of myself. So our first revolution in mobility, we started out as pedestrians, walking, biking, and horse and buggy as the common way of getting around, which was leading to its own environmental concerns of a very different kind back then. I'm not going to talk about around the migration of cars and airplanes. We're going to focus more on the city level and what's happening more in our community. So we'll talk about more what's happening on the roadways, curb to curb and sidewalks, but how quickly we've gone through these first couple revolutions is the main point that I want to make and set us up for an open question here. So you might have seen a version of this slide. I'm starting to see it pop up in a lot of different presentations, but both images here are Easter Day parades in New York City. On the left-hand side, for everyone facing the screen up there, it's all horse and buggy with one automobile in that picture. On the right-hand side, it's all automobiles with one horse and buggy in that picture. This all happened over the course of 13 years. That's a pretty short time frame when we think about the kinds of decisions that we're making right now, the folks in this room that are investing in infrastructure and making decisions around policy and then infrastructure itself. When you think about less than 15 years having that kind of drastic change, that's kind of startling. Second revolution was build out of our freeway system. This happened not quite as quickly. I think it's more like 20 or 30, 35 years from when everything started till it was really wrapped up. But that's a pretty massive effort around our country. And if you want to get something done with big dollars and pretty quickly, make it a defense act, because that's what gets us motivated, I guess. In both of these cases, with the first revolution and the second revolution, we've had some pretty negative, some detrimental impacts on our communities, on our cities. And I won't go into, because it would chew up a lot of the rest of our time, a lot of those impacts, but we know what neighborhoods were bulldozed over when we expanded the freeway system or built the freeway system, and what neighborhoods have been cut off from the rest of the city. And we're spending a lot of time, energy, and money trying to go back and correct a lot of the equity issues and impacts and safety issues and impacts and other things when we went and just did this so quickly. Didn't really think about the long-term implications. So what is this third revolution? Well, there's no real battles here. The battles are technology and policy and political, really. But it's the convergence of these four new technologies and new business models that are happening simultaneously: the automated, connected, electric, and shared mobility. And again, it's the convergence of all those happening that are going to drastically change the way that people get from here to there, and should be influencing a lot of our policies right now as we think about the investments we should be making in infrastructure in the future. So I'm going to wrap this part of the presentation up because the call to action with this and setting the table up for how you guys think about this from your department's perspective, and hopefully it's very different perspectives that all come back together to think about what do we want our cities and our communities to look like. This time, let's not pretend we don't see this big revolution coming, and whether it happens in 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, that part doesn't matter so much. It's coming, and it's going to change the way that we get from here to there. It gives us a chance to figure out what we want our cities and our communities to look like, and then make the technology work for us instead of designing our cities and our infrastructure around the technology. So that's the call to action. We can switch back to the master slide or whatever else, because I don't have anything else to go through. But you want to start us off with how you would respond to that call to action? And since you weren't able to join us in the prep call, we can start the other way and go down the list if you want to ponder that a little bit more. Would you? Okay. You want to start?
So just quick, really quick context. Arizona has actually had a little bit of a legacy around automotive innovation. We've largely because, frankly, our heat. We've got a lot of the major OEMs have proving grounds. However, within the last decade, we've really seen a real surgence around automated vehicle testing, largely because, again, predictable weather, particularly in the Phoenix region, and pretty solid grid lines for that. But as many of you will remember, there was so much anticipation that within 5-7 years, you were going to have automated vehicles flooding your roadways. And so this created a sense of urgency, a call to action within Arizona to say, how do we start preparing for this type of technology and trying to understand it a little better? And so with that, back in 2018, we formed the Institute of Automated Mobility. It's more become advanced mobility, really, to really provide guidance to the state and our regional and local partners around this technology, to bring in a broader ecosystem of experts, both from our universities, from our small and large firms, as well as our public agencies, to start to try to get together and really explore that kind of work. And so we've been focusing in 3 major areas. Again, quickly, one is just trying to understand what data matters when evaluating the performance of automated vehicles. You may be aware that there is no national consensus or global consensus on what data matters when evaluating these vehicles. The second area is that realizing that a lot of the perception technology that are kind of moving these vehicles through our roadway systems, LiDAR, radar, cameras, have potential utility on our infrastructure. And so we've been collaborating. We've got a live test bed up in the northern community and in the Phoenix region, run by our Maricopa County Department of Transportation, which has allowed us to flood that community. It's got 11 intersections with all kinds of different technology to better understand, to begin to give us some insight into how automated vehicles work and ways that we might be able to improve our safety outcomes on our roadway. And then the third area is around connectivity. Really, this is something that a lot of folks before I even got involved in it had been lamenting for years, that we've had this situation where connected vehicles, Volpe, and estimates, I guess there's less than 1,000 truly connected vehicles on the roadway right now. How would we be able to incentivize the development? And so we won a US DOT SMART grant last year that's enabling us to kind of take what most of us have in our purses, our pockets, is a smartphone, and be able to utilize that technology to potentially communicate verifiable safety messages to the traveling public. So I think it's that kind of proactive engagement that I think has been a real benefit for Arizona as we're trying to think of how to catch up, because we certainly are behind with this impending next revolution.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so. When I'm thinking about here in the city of Denver, we, like many cities, sort of underwent this transition to motor vehicles, which in many ways ripped apart our city. We let our city dictate how our infrastructure was designed. And you can see that, all throughout. So the oldest building that we have in Denver is this beautiful masonry building right on Court and 15th, I think. And it's just a standalone building. Right now, it's actually unoccupied. And it's surrounded by parking lots, right? So it used to be surrounded by all these businesses. It was you can look at old photos. It was a very vibrant place, and no longer, right? Now it's car-centric in design, and we need cars to get around. People are going to continue to use them. But I think that when we think about using technology to sort of push forward the next revolution, sometimes that is integrating these technological advances into technologies that have existed since before the car, right? So like e-bikes. I rode my e-bike over here today. It's a low impact, low carbon way to travel. You can get a lot more people through a city on bikes than you can in the private automobile. Buses and trains are effective ways to get long distances, particularly within cities. And so as we are designing our infrastructure as we're designing our technology for tomorrow's infrastructure, I think that's sort of how we need to be thinking about these things, is less reliance on today's status quo, because of how that status quo has, in many ways, had these detrimental effects on our cities. In public transportation, automated technology, Hawaii last year introduced their automated metro system. And so, if you were to visit today, you'd be able to take a train from destination to destination without a driver. You have a lot of those safety impacts, and you still have all of the benefits of public transportation. If you flew into Denver today, you probably took the automated guideway system at the airport. There's a reason why we're not just putting people on cars to travel from Terminal C to Terminal A. That's not an efficient way of getting people around. And the same concerns about moving people throughout an airport, which is that we have a ton of people and we need to get them from destination to destination, holds true in urban settings as well. And so that's sort of how we're thinking about things in the climate office. Obviously, the more efficiently we can move people around, the lower our carbon emissions go. We have about a third of emissions here in the city of Denver come from transportation, and electrified mobility is going to be a huge part of that, right? I'm not going to ask the garbage trucks to be some type of public transportation, right? Like, we're going to need electric vehicles for all sorts of city services and for all manner of reasons. But stepping back from total car dependency and refocusing on how we can make our city for people and not just for the private automobile.
So my goal is to help utilities get customers' energy assets into demand response programs and be able to be controlled by, what the grid needs. So one risk I see, and one thing to your point, is how do we construct programs early, and how do we construct messaging to customers, to residents, so they want to have their vehicles a part of these programs, so they want to, or how they can understand and make sense for themselves about why, we might ask them to stop charging from 6 to 7, or we might charge when there's excess solar on the grid. So I think, if you wait too long to engage these people, if you wait too long to incentivize them, create, reasons for them to be a part of this, I think you can really miss the boat. And utilities are having a lot of problems right now with EVs popping up, in really isolated areas on the grid, certain neighborhoods or whatnot. So, making sure that we don't miss out on educating and helping people, residents, get a part of this future.
I would say we have already entered the third revolution. It's not that we are waiting for that to happen, mainly from the perspective that our cars are getting smarter, our public transportation systems are getting smarter. It's just a matter of how soon we adapt to the revolution 3.5 with integration of artificial intelligence, IoT, smart sensors, etc. To talk from city's perspective, there is a current program that city has been working on is Denver Moves Everyone 2050. It's a visionary program where the goal is to increase the public ridership, influencing the citizens of Denver to use more public transportation by creating more integration between different modes of public transportation that we have right now, creating BRT systems, creating smoother integration between switching from one public system to another. And I believe that the point that we really need to work on is improving the first and last mile connectivity, because that is the main point which is not really encouraging people to move from private ownership of their vehicles as compared to public ownership. And I work as a senior cost estimator. I can say that city is planning to invest about $800 million a year to make sure that this integration and adaptability of the new systems that we envision for 2050 is better than our expectations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some of the early folks, when AVs were first wave of buzz, we're talking about the nightmare versus the dream scenario of the implementation of AVs. And if the nightmare version is these AVs just replace the gas guzzling single occupant vehicle, but it's the same number of trips, or potentially worse. I take a trip here and then my car drives all the way back home, comes back and picks me up. You're not solving any problems, you're just moving it. And so, this is where policy and that idea of what do we want our cities to be like, make the technology work for us, comes into play, because none of this should be replacing public transportation. Public transportation is still going to be the most effective way to move mass quantities of people from point A to point B if they can make that first and last mile connection. And so again, through making those proactive decisions, how do we guide it that way instead of letting it happen the way that the market might want to do? And James, when we talked about this earlier, I like the almost Dr. Seuss way that you talked about your role with the city. Like, I will get there by bike, and I will get there by feet, and I will get there by scooter, and it was, you almost defined your role as wanting to make sure that all of those other modes, and again, the way we want our livable cities to be like, that this works for us. You elaborate maybe on that piece?
Yeah, the way I think about things is I want to get people onto the bus, and I want to get them onto the train, and I want to get them on their bike and their own 2 feet. And if I can't do any of those things, then let's get them in an electric vehicle. And I think that, that creates a robust system that's resilient to population increases, right? We can replace every single ICE vehicle on the road with an EV, and we've taken care of tailpipe emissions, but we haven't taken care of the devastating effects of highway expansions on our communities, or the needs of parking downtown that take the place of businesses and reasons to come downtown. And so if we sort of have this almost order of thinking about things where we have active and public transportation here at the top, and then electrified, automobiles below that, and that would include things like Uber and Lyft, they're still going to play a role in this system. Then I think we can have a much more healthier system and encourage, cities where people want to be and have vibrant cities, right? A car is a tool, but if you walked into a tool shop and it was just hammers everywhere, you'd be like, this tool shop sucks, right? And that's how we've designed our cities for the past 100 years. It's just like, nah, it's got to be car, it's got to be car. If you spend any time walking around Denver, you are very familiar with our Hollywood sidewalks where there's 2 feet of concrete and then it's sloped on the side. That was designed at a time when the city was basically the future is nobody walking anymore. That's a crazy future. Do we want that? No, right? We want to keep walking. We want to keep biking. And so I think that if we can keep that ordinal thinking to things, we can integrate these technologies in a way that serves the community.
So Matt, you've got another interesting role the space that you play in has another interesting role in the way our cities evolve and what we want them to be like. The vast majority of people that own EVs charge at home in the morning and evening. That works great for people that own a home and a driveway and quick access to power. Not everybody does. A lot of people live in apartment buildings. A lot of people live downtown. We have to have other charging alternatives for that, and yet we want this to roll out in a way that still supports people being able to walk and bike and wheelchair and move around. So how do you guys envision that balance, and what is your role in that space? And how are you partnering with the city and other folks?
Definitely don't have a good solution. I've thought about that myself too, but I think workplace charging is something that we've been focusing on a lot, where there's excess solar to be soaked up. So I think incentivizing people to do that is great, and also trying to figure out the multifamily charging solution has been tricky. So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe we're happy in that a lot of the early adopters here, are charging in their garage in the morning and the night, and they're typically, pretty open to being a part of a demand response program. But I think you bring up a good point.
Okay, well, maybe we make some connections here and figure out how to encourage that. Marissa, I want to come back to a point that you kind of scratched there. I was down in Phoenix recently for the Intelligent Transportation System conference of ITS America, and there were robotaxis everywhere, and it was pretty awesome for transportation geeks. And but you mentioned connectivity, and so as an industry, and those of us work in this space, we talk about the connected autonomous vehicle, but there's definitely autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles, and I would like to encourage a lot more voices that say, let's bring those back together. And so it's great to hear that that's a focus area. One point that I want to make, when you talk about only a few thousand cars being connected, that's true with a specific definition of the way the feds call connected vehicles, being a radio on the edge of the road talking to a radio in my car. But actually, vast majority of the cars for the last 8 years that are rolling off the assembly lines are connected, just over their own cellular connection, and we can't really yet tap into that for the bigger picture. So how are you guys envisioning, or are you still a little early in in connecting those dots, putting the C back in CAV.
Yeah, we're still early in the process. I will just make a note around the automated vehicles. You know, there's been a lot of headlines about automated vehicles, particularly, I think, in San Francisco. They've been really up in arms around it, and rightly so, because there's some very difficult edge cases. How do you communicate? How does this system communicate with the first responder? How do they navigate through work zones? How do they handle heavy traffic areas around sporting events, different things like that? And we're seeing that in Phoenix as well too. We do think that connectivity has a role to play, and candidly, if you are familiar with visiting some of the automated vehicle operations, they have a back office of human eyes that are going around with their vehicles per se to be able to help them navigate out of that system. I think that, you know, one of the things that we're really excited, we're currently working with Verizon on this project, but we're in conversations with T-Mobile and AT&T, is that there's a real opportunity. I'm hearing some really encouraging push from folks like Audi and Volkswagen, who are very interested in really, however we define connectivity, making that more engaged in the vehicles and the systems that are going forward. So we're hoping to be able to tap into that, and we'll learn some lessons along the way about just the nuances of that technology. I think one of the big things that you do get concerned about with connectivity is all the distraction that's already happening with connectivity, and are we adding another layer of beeps and buzzes and different things like that in the vehicle that would somehow relative to traditionally driven vehicles, that people are going to be distracted, but in ways in which we can increase visibility around pedestrians and bicyclists is huge, right? Because particularly in our streets, we've got notoriously challenging streets. They were designed all around an automobile. You've got, in some cases, 5 to 8 lanes going in one direction. When you pull up, it's hard to get visibility around what's happening in the other lanes, and we see a lot of accidents and incidents, way too many for that, for sure.
And Rishi, you made the point about, you know, the third revolution is already here, and so I think was it William Gibson? The future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So that comes to mind a little bit. But I like your 3.5 idea, and this kind of relates back to this conversation around the use of sensors and data collection and sharing that with the automated vehicle, because they can see everything around a certain bubble around the vehicle, but they can't see what's on the other side of that truck, they can't see what's around that corner, and they can't see that there's road construction 2 miles ahead. But we can give that information to them if they're in a position to accept it. We're right at 2 minutes left, and if I ask any more questions, there's no way we can wrap them all up in 2 minutes. So I want to thank Ken and the conference itself. Our opening session talked about the unique role of this conference, and hearing from our public sector panelists and having that be the majority of the voices that we're hearing from. It is unique, and it's very important to us that are trying to help you to actually listen to you. So thank you very much, panel. Thank you, Ken, and let's go ahead and do what you need to do to send us off to lunch.